Kentucky author Jesse Stewart once said that to him, cornbread represented both the hard realities of mountain poverty as well as the comforting, grounding traditions of Appalachian culture. And I certainly agree with him on that one. If you ask anyone who grew up in Appalachia, they're going to tell you that most nights there was a pound of cornbread on the evening supper table. So today I want to share with you my family's recipe for absolutely delicious cornbread. It's a rainy evening here in the East Kentucky Appalachian foothills, and you might even hear a little bit of thunder rumbling in the background, but that's okay. It'll just make for a perfect night for a hot pound of cornbread with supper. The recipe that I'm going to share with you comes from an old church cookbook. So before you even start thinking about a recipe for cornbread, there's two important things that you need to have. You need to have a good hot oven that I'm getting ready to preheat to 425 degrees. And you also need to have a cast iron skillet, preferably one that's old and seasoned and smooth. And to that old cast iron skillet, I'm going to add some bacon grease, and I'll show you about how much bacon grease I'm going to put in. All right, so I collect bacon grease and I keep it just sitting on my stove because we go through it pretty quickly. In order to make really good cornbread, I think you have to have some kind of a good fat. So you could either use lard, some people use oil. I just find that bacon grease, it just adds something to it. So I put about 3 teaspoons of bacon grease. Now that bacon grease gives it a really nice crunchy crust, and it just adds a deep, rich flavor that I love. So I'm going to stick this into an oven that's preheating to 425 degrees. Now let's talk about the recipe that we're going to use today. Now, if you watch 25 different videos on Appalachian cornbread, you're probably going to see 25 different recipes. There's always the question of whether or not you add sugar to your cornbread. Now, 100 years ago, absolutely, I guarantee nobody was putting sugar in their cornbread. Sugar was not something that Appalachian cooks had readily available. That was a luxury, not something that they're going to put in their nightly cornbread to feed their family. But as time has passed, cornbread has evolved a little bit in Appalachia, and it's okay now to put sugar in your cornbread. The recipe that I'm using does have a little bit of sugar in it, but I don't feel like it's a sweet recipe. It's still very savory. Sometimes I think that sugar just sort of cuts the cornmeal a little bit and makes it just a little bit of a softer texture. So do you put sugar or not? It's kind of up to you, but I promise you this recipe is delicious. So here is the recipe for my version of traditional Appalachian cornbread. You are going to need 1 1/4 cup of self-rising cornmeal. Now, I normally don't like to buy the already put together self-rising flour or self-rising cornmeal, but there's something about this recipe that just works really well. So I go ahead and get self-rising cornmeal and self-rising flour to go in this recipe. I like White Lily self-rising flour and Martha White self-rising cornmeal. Those are just my 2 favorites. I've never had any bad luck with them through the years. So 1 1/4 cup of self-rising cornmeal, and that's the Martha White self-rising cornmeal. You'll need 1/3 cup of self-rising flour. The White Lily self-rising flour is best. You need 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, a teaspoon of sugar, a cup of buttermilk, and 1 egg. And then just a little bit of water to thin your batter down a little because you need a fairly thin pourable batter. And that water just depends on the humidity or how big your egg is. It just depends. So we'll just play with that there at the end. But so that's just your basic recipe, and I will put that in the description below in case you didn't write that down. It's really easy to follow. It's a really easy recipe. It comes together pretty quick. So let me show you how to get it all put together. All right, if you watched my biscuit recipe, you'll know that I like to sift my dry ingredients together. Oh, there's my oven coming to temperature. We're just going to leave that cast iron skillet in there because, like I said, you want it as hot as you can possibly get it. So I'm going to leave my cast iron in my oven as it's preheated and just let it keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Okay, so I'm going to sift my dry ingredients together, and I'm going to start with 1 1/4 cup of self-rising cornmeal. Now, I always like a yellow cornmeal, but when I went to the grocery store the other day, they were out of yellow cornmeal, so I had to get the white. Even though I don't really like it as well, it's okay. We can still use it. It's still going to be good. To that 1 1/4 cup of self-rising cornmeal, I'm going to add 1/3 cup of self-rising flour. I need 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And a teaspoon of sugar. Now my sugar looks brown because it is organic sugar, but it's still just plain sugar. Okay, I'm going to sift that together. And what that does is it just sort of fluffs up your flour and your cornmeal, and it gets everything incorporated evenly. Some people might throw this part away because it's kind of what's left of the cornmeal, but I like my cornmeal just with a little bit of texture to it, so I just always put that back in. To this, our dry ingredients, I'm going to add a cup of buttermilk and 1 egg, and I'm going to show you how to do that. All right, you'll need a cup of buttermilk. Okay. To that cup of buttermilk, I add my egg right into it. And then I whisk that together to mix my egg into my buttermilk. Get a better spoon. Okay, this is very similar to making biscuits. I always make myself a little well in the middle. And I pour in my 1 cup of buttermilk and my egg mixture, my wet ingredients. One thing about cornbread, kind of just like when you're making biscuits, you don't want to over mix it. That's looking pretty good. It's still a little thick. So I'm going to put just a little bit of water in the bottom of my measuring cup. Just kind of rinse it out there. And let's see how this looks. You want it almost like a pancake consistency, because when it pours into that hot skillet, it's going to start forming its crust immediately. So you want it to be able to be poured pretty easily. That's about the consistency that I want. Yep, that'll be perfect. Now here comes the good part. I'm going to go get my hot cast iron skillet, and then I'll pull you in and show you what it looks like as you pour your batter into your hot skillet. Here is my hot skillet. I'm going to pour my cornbread mix into my skillet, and I hope you can hear the sizzle. Oh yeah. You'll want to get every drop you can get of this good mix. Okay. Just kind of smooth that out just a tad. And let's get this back in the oven. I'm going to put it into a 425 oven. I'm going to set the timer for 30 minutes. It's been 30 minutes and my cornbread is done. It smells delicious. I just pulled it out of the oven. You can see that it's really golden brown and beautiful. Now this pan that I use makes a thinner cornbread. It might be a thinner cornbread than what you would prefer or what your pan would give you. It just depends on the size of your cast iron skillet or whatever pan you bake it in. But we prefer a thin cornbread. It's the way my grandmother always made it, so we like it this way. So I'm going to flip it out onto a plate and let you see what it looks like. Okay, so you take a plate. Okay. Okay, let me get rid of my hot skillet here so I don't burn myself. Let's cut this cornbread up here. Okay. Oh, that looks delicious. I wish you could smell it. All right, and that is what your cornbread is going to look like. And here it is on the plate. I'm gonna be happy to add this to supper tonight. I hope you try this recipe of my version of Appalachian traditional cornbread with just a little bit of sugar added. And thank you so much for stopping by Curvy Creek Farm, where you're always going to find simple living in a busy world.